We didn't have television, so there was no TV in the 70s in Guyana. So we kind of grew up listening to the radio, and then we saw a lot of films. I was a big fan of The Sound of Music. I guess I was maybe about 4 or 5. I remember seeing that film probably 10 to 15 times. When I first came to Canada, I was 12 years old, and I was really perceived as a misfit. I was younger than most of the kids in my grade because I'd started school earlier than most people. I was about a foot shorter than everyone else in my class. I was aware that I didn't fit in, and I found that acting and theater was a class that kind of accepted you. You know, it was sort of the misfits, the outcasts of the school. And we had a very athletically oriented school, which I really wasn't. We had 2 amazing teachers in my high school. I'd say that they, more than anything else, became the inspiration. And, you know, out of our school, out of, a group of students that went through that school in about 2 years, came Mike Myers, Eric McCormack, some people who were out there making films, directing, working in production as well. It was a pretty inspirational school to be in, and it wasn't a performing arts school. It was just a regular high school with 2 teachers who did everything they could, and gave of their time to produce these shows, these musicals in their off time. But I think it was about building confidence as well, that allowed this group of students to kind of believe that we could get out there and we could have careers. It was a really inspirational time, and that's sort of what led me to that passion of wanting to go on to theater school. Coming from a somewhat conservative family background, I had to do math at the University of Waterloo before I could pursue my desire to go to theater school in New York. So I did have to wait a couple of years, but once I was able to get down to New York, and I got into a terrific school there, the Neighbourhood Playhouse, which was run by an old guru of method acting named Sandy Meisner. And I had the good fortune of actually spending 8 weeks of my time there under Sandy's instruction, which was incredible because I think he was probably in his mid-80s at that time. Sandy was tough. He was a tough old guy, I remember he walked around with a stick, actually, and he'd, poke you or whack you, especially if you weren't looking at him. And he'd go, "There, that's an honest reaction," He actually had his larynx removed, and the way Sandy spoke is by swallowing oxygen and almost burping up his words. And he had to teach himself to talk again. So you listened very, very closely when Sandy was in the room. What I learned from him was the importance of truth on film. That was a message that he drove home every class that we had with him. I found theater school exhilarating. I found it difficult. I found it, frustrating. I found it to be the fulfillment of a dream. And ultimately, what it did, it sort of allowed me to have the life experience of living away from home when I was 19, and kind of becoming my own person. So I ended up getting a job at the United Nations, working in public relations. I was one of the guys that answered the international phone lines, en français et anglais. That was a short-term job. And when that was over, the Canadian mission to the United Nations had a job opening. And at that time, Stephen Lewis was actually running the Canadian office, and he was always one of my heroes. So I applied. I didn't really think I had a hope in hell of getting that job, but as it turned out, they hired me. Again, that job really opened my eyes to a lot of issues and policies. That was the start of the awareness of the AIDS epidemic in Africa. And to me, that was an incredibly important message to be getting out to the world at that point. I think a lot of people living in New York at that time, a lot of gay men, didn't know that an epidemic was coming. And luckily for me, I was there going through my own coming out process, and I sort of came out in a time of safe sex awareness. And that's what was happening in New York at that time. And I was incredibly proud that we had this representative of Canada at the United Nations that had such a profoundly strong voice. Like, I get very verklempt when I talk about it, but, I really felt proud to be Canadian. What was amazing is I ended up, sort of going on to this path of becoming a filmmaker, and I wound up at Norman Jewison's Canadian Film Centre. Out of that experience, I partnered with Clement Virgo, and we worked together on a short film, which was called Save My Lost Nigga Soul, very controversially titled short, which won the Best Canadian Short in 1993. And out of that collaboration, Clement and I started Conquering Lion Pictures, which produced our first feature that went to the Cannes Film Festival in 1995, along with Karen King, who had done a similar program at the Canadian Film Centre the year after us. We made a film together called Rude. And Rude was, I believe it's the first Black-produced, written, and directed feature film in Canada. And, I'm still really proud of that film. And that was, I'd say, really my first feature. I went after a lot of people who knew way more than I did and brought them to the table because I felt that the project had artistic strengths about it that warranted, warranted that sort of participation. We're working right now on The Harder They Come, a remake of the cult classic out of the Caribbean, made by Perry Hensel, Jamaican filmmaker. The Harder They Come launched the career of Jimmy Cliff, and I think it was the first dramatic feature made in the Caribbean in 1972. So I'm really thrilled about that project. It's coming together as a Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica co-production. And I think those are things that we're going to be seeing a lot more. This, to me, is a sign that we're heading into a very global direction for films. And I think in these days of instant connectivity, where, I can tap on my computer screen and see my old aunt in Trinidad, I think that sort of connectivity is going to make us want to expand our storytelling. There's traditional Hollywood studio stuff that we will continue to see, but those films seem to be getting larger. They seem to be moving more in a tentpole direction. And I do think that there will be a lot more interest in films that are coming from smaller places, lesser known places. And that's really exciting for me as a filmmaker. I tend to gravitate towards those stories. And The Book of Negroes is a book that has a lot of anticipation. Lawrence Hill, the writer, has done a masterful job of detailing that character's life. The strength of that book is Aminata Diallo. That's the young woman whose life journey we follow through the course of that story. I hope our vision will be able to bring nuance and depth to the character in a way that the readers, the incredible fan base for that book, will appreciate it. Advice to aspiring filmmakers. Just do it. There's a kind of resourcefulness that filmmakers have when they're passionate about an idea. That's something that if you really want to do it, I think you got to have that passion driving you if you want to make films. It's super important to have good support material because everything comes from that. If you're able to attach cast, it'll come because, there's really well-written characters. If you want to get a great DOP, a good story is a way to hook a good DOP. If you're just starting out, I think you really have to have something substantial to work from. But, once you've got that in place, you don't need to have A-list actors to make a film. You just need good actors and the sort of sweat and the willingness to get your hands dirty. It's not easy, but I think if you want it badly enough, it's yours to take.